Now, at the end of today's programmes, here's a chart arranged in cooperation with the Air Ministry to forecast the weather.
This is what viewers saw who tuned in to the first day's programmes on BBC television on Monday the 2nd of November 1936, and I can tell you here and now, I wasn't one of them. This was the start of television weather forecasts, and apart from a break in transmissions during the war, they've continued every day ever since. We've only been able to see the clouds like this for about a quarter of a century, but throughout man's history, his development has always been affected by a change in the weather. This programme isn't about the weather itself, but about the way we present it to you on television. We're about to make a major change. A direct link to one of the world's foremost weather forecasting computers will enable us to give you a better picture of what we expect to happen, and if we get it wrong, a better understanding of why weather forecasting is not an exact science. But first, let's go back in time to see how things have developed up to now. This chart that we saw earlier, not perhaps the most helpful of devices, was later accompanied by a script read by an announcer, and that simple type of forecast is still used today. But in 1954, it was decided that a fuller explanation of the forecast needed someone in vision to tell the story. The pioneer television weathermen were George Cowling and this man, Tom Clifton. They've been followed over the years by well-known faces such as Bert Ford, Keith Best, Jack Scott, Jim Bacon, and the first weather woman, Barbara Edwards. At present, there is the gang of three, Michael Fish, Ian McCaskill and myself. And of course, there's also Francis Wilson on Breakfast Time. During this time, all of us have shared one common aim, and that is to tell the daily weather story as simply and as clearly as possible.
Hello there. And if you got wet today, well, you were decidedly unlucky because there wasn't much heavy rain at all about. There was some few spots here and there in western areas, and the southeast of England has stayed dry, although it's got progressively more cloudy. But let's go across and take a look at today's chart. And at midday, looking fairly simple, high pressure over the Alps, a low pressure near Iceland, another cell of high pressure on the western side of the Atlantic. And
as you can see, Bert and his colleagues not only had to be forecasters, they had to be quite good artists as well. All the charts were hand-drawn every day. One of the great leaps forward in television forecasting was this, magnetic rubber. We began to use it for making our symbols and lines in the late 60s. And here's Graham Parker using them, and you can see what a difference it made compared with Bert a few years earlier. It made our lives much, much easier. Well, most of the time.
Already, though, at the beginning of the day, you will find one or two showers dotted about here and there. And as the day goes on, I think you're going to find these showers will tend to become heavier and more frequent. And many of them could well turn out later on in the day to be fairly thundery with some, oh dear, let's do it again.
The familiar sun and rain symbols, which you saw in that clip, arrived in 1975. And I well remember doing the first broadcast with them. They may have caused the odd problem, but have more than served their purpose because they made a successful attempt to broaden an interest in the weather to the widest audience. Because another of our problems has been that our audience spans from the well-informed, like the farmers and sailors, to those who just want to know whether or not to take an umbrella or to hang the washing out. So where next with the weather forecast? Well, over the years, we've looked at some other ways in which the weather is presented around the world.
E em relação às quantidades de precipitação, chuva resultante de aguaceiros ou chuva, as quantidades mais significativas ocorreram na Serra da Estrela, 62 milímetros. De realçar que, ao fim da tarde, registraram-se primeiros nevões na Serra da Estrela.
Adesso cominciamo la nostra esposizione della situazione con leggere le temperature registrate alle ore 13 di oggi. Catania 22, Reggio Calabria, Messina e Palermo 20, Pescara, Napoli e Bari 19, Roma, Catanzaro, Cagliari 16, Venezia, Genova, Ancona e Alghero 15, Bologna, Firenze e Pisa 14, Trieste, L'Aquila, Campobasso e Potenza 13, Milano, Torino e Perugia 12, Bolzano e Verona 9 gradi.
Høytrykket her det forsterker seg noe. Nordenfor har vi et lavtrykksområde med tilhørende nedbørområde, og disse beveger seg østover. Nedbørområdet kommer inn over Troms til natten, og ut på dagen i morgen en posisjon over Finnmark. Lavtrykket i denne posisjonen. Og etter hvert så får vi en litt kjøligere luftstrøm ned mot kystområdene.
Téléspectateurs, bonsoir. Ce temps frais des dernières 48 heures, ce temps frais accompagné d'averses de neige, de grésil, d'orage et surtout de cette terrible tempête appartient heureusement au passé. Cette dépression se trouve actuellement sur l'URSS. Mais il reste encore ces courants du nord-ouest, ces courants frais.
Well, perhaps not. But to find out how we're updating our presentation, I'll take you on a quick guided tour starting at Bracknell in Berkshire. The Meteorological Office. It's part of the Ministry of Defence and one of the world's 3 main centres for strategic weather forecasting, the others being in Washington and Moscow. Ah, not again. A new link between the computer here and another at Television Centre will enable us to show how the weather will develop in an exciting graphical manner. This is the communications room, and into here flow all the weather observations from all over the world. What happens is that people go out, they look at the pressure, the temperature, the wind, the cloud, and they code it up in a special mathematical code and then send it in to us. We get observations from land stations, from weather ships, from satellites, from all over the place. Some of the incoming information is turned into pictorial form and passed on to people like us at Television Centre. But it's also sent in a digital form to the main computer. Using a mathematical model of the whole world's atmosphere, this powerful machine crunches numbers at the rate of over 400 million calculations a second. Well, with this typical home computer, it would take us about 70 days non-stop to do the calculations, whereas the large computer here can do it in about 4 minutes. And if I were to try it myself with a pencil and a rubber, it would probably take me forever. And then I'd probably get it wrong. To give some idea of how fast the technology has changed, all this machinery here is 10 times more powerful than its predecessor, installed only 10 years ago, when it was the world's most powerful computer. And that one's now gone off to a museum. I suppose in another 10 years, it'll all fit in a suitcase. Psst, anybody want a computer? So with all this high technology, what's the point in having chaps like me around? Well, the Met Office places great emphasis on the experience of human forecasters as well as the computer.
Dave, we have a ship on the screen down there, which implies that this may be going.
A team of specialists constantly monitors the output of the computer, and after discussion with a senior forecaster, may modify the input to give a more realistic solution to some of the problems. The result is a computer model of the Earth's atmosphere up to 100,000 feet, and a detailed forecast up to 36 hours ahead, and a less detailed one up to 6 days ahead. The final output after all this work can be shown in a variety of ways. When I was a lad, this job took me over an hour using a pair of pens strapped together. This plotter does it in 7 minutes, and it's much neater than I ever was. And indeed, even this has now been superseded, and by using a technique known affectionately as the flying spot, the computer can plot the same chart in the twinkling of an eye. It produces a great number of different charts to help the forecasters make their judgments on what's the most likely thing to happen to the weather. And it's this information in a form that we can understand at the BBC that we're going to use. In fact, the computer translates from the Met Office language into a BBC language, and this, in a digital form, will be disappearing down this hole and into the British Telecom system.
I blow through here, the music goes round and around, whoa, and it comes up here.
And it comes out here. Or is it here? Now we're in Television Centre in London. Throughout the day and night, the Bracknell computer delivers its information to the computer graphics area here. It's fed into the heart of our system, this VAX computer. Also housed in this area is an electronic paint box, a clever piece of graphics computery that produces all the very high-quality pictures that you'll see. The information flows down the cable from the VAX to draw or paint lines or symbols over the maps already sitting in its own store. All clever stuff. For 2 years now, a team of programmers and graphic designers have been working away producing the maps and diagrams for the system. These days, even pencil and paper are computerized, and some of the development work was done on this electronic artist's pad.
To start with, we weren't sure how large to make the maps, so I cut out a picture of you from a weather broadcast you're doing at the moment, and by using this machine I can make you different sizes on the screen.
Can you slim me down a bit, please?
Yes, here we go.
Then I understand, Liz, it got pretty complicated.
Yes, this system was fine for designing the basic maps and for deciding to use drop shadows for things. But as soon as we got the information from Bracknell, with the isobar charts and the wind and the predicted rainfall, I needed to call on a team of programmers to help me interpret it.
And so the BBC's computer graphic workshop swung into action. The one thing we haven't changed, though, are the symbols themselves, as over the last 10 years, they've become almost as well known as the road signs. These, along with all the maps, have to be recorded into the VAX computer. All this work is going to continue for a while yet, as over the next few months, more ways of showing different aspects of the weather will be introduced. For instance, if you've been bothered by the bad snows of this winter, I'm sure you'll be glad to know that we're already working on a system being able to show you where and when the snows will be falling for next winter. But for the next part of the story, I've got to go down to the weatherman's office. When the weatherman arrives in the morning to start preparing the day's forecast, the first job, after getting the coffee that is to study the charts that come in on our MUFAX machines and get a good briefing on the current and future weather situation. These charts come in overnight from the same computer that we saw at the Met Office. Well, after studying those MUFAX charts, I now come to my small computer. This helps me to construct the electronic slideshow that we're going to show you on the weather forecast. It then gives instructions via this modem to the main computer upstairs, which in turn instructs the paint box to draw me some pretty pictures on this screen. Now it's time to get the mouse out of its cage, and this is the mouse. It's a piece of equipment which allows me to move a pointer around the screen and select any piece of information I want to and put it anywhere on my map. So for instance, with the aid of the mouse, I can pick up this snow symbol and I can put it over the country where we forecast snow at any particular time, and then I can just preview that and we'll see all that come up on this color monitor. Incidentally, this VDU screen here may appear to be flickering to you. It certainly isn't to me, and it's just the interaction between this system and the television cameras. Now, what I want to have a look at now is the wind direction and speed. I'll just put one or two little circles around so we can have a look. Switch that off, up to edit, and then come down and have a look at the wind direction. I can click this around to any direction that I want to, and then I can come down and have a look at the wind speed. Once we do that and then come over to this right-hand scale, this acts as a wind table. Then you can see the wind speeds going up and down, and I can select the one that I need and then pop it on any of the speeds. I can then have a look at the preview and see my handiwork come up once again on this preview screen. Well, now I've decided what charts and maps that I want to go into the weather forecast. I can put them into this box. I've got 64 available boxes there, and I can put them in any permutation combination that I want to. Not only that, I can decide whether I want to stop it at any one point so that I can explain that particular map to you, or whether I want to run it as a sequence. And then all I need to do then is to have a look and view it once more on our color monitor here. And what's happening is that I'm seeing little miniature charts of the ones that I've actually put into the broadcast. And you'll notice as we're coming along, they're coming out in sequence, and that I've only used 19 of the available 64 that I could do, mainly because in this case it's a very short broadcast. Well, that's the end of this bit, but let's get down to the studio now and put it all together down there. Go on, clear off out of the way. Well, this is the studio where we transmit the weather. All the weather images are stored on a magnetic disc, so we need a way to show them to you and for me to be able to see what I'm pointing at. To put me in the picture, we use a system known as color separation overlay. Sounds posh, I know, but all that's needed is for me to stand in front of a blue screen and the electronics do the rest. I said a tropical island, not a traffic island. This is all very clever, but all I can still see is a plain blue screen. So for me to see what I have to point at for the forecast, we use a projector situated behind here. This is actually a projection screen, and we shine the weather pictures on the back so that I can actually see what I'm pointing at. Then if we switch on everything together, hey presto, now I can see the charts and so can you. But there's even more, because when I look at the camera, I can see the completed picture right in front of the lens. It's exactly the same device used by the newsreaders, but instead of seeing words, I see exactly what you're seeing. That's providing I've cleaned my glasses. But also on the same picture is a countdown clock, which tells me when to stop talking. That's never an easy task, but it's better than a mallet or being cut off in a prime. Finally, this push button is linked to the computer in the studio and lets me change the charts when I want. It's a bit like a slideshow, but what a show. But what are you actually going to see? You may be asking yourselves by now. Well, let's start with the maps. The first one is the Atlantic map. You notice the raised area here. This is where all the action will take place. We'll be able to show you the past, the present, the future in the form of satellite pictures. We'll be able to show you pressure charts and also rainfall charts too. We'll be looking further afield, looking into Europe quite often. A lot of our weather comes that way, of course, and a fair number of people, particularly in the low countries, watch our broadcasts at any rate. You'll find the British Isles chart coming up in all various guises too. Satellite pictures too, we can see the movies going on through the past 24 hours. The one thing to notice at the top in here, because it's past data, the numbers will come up in blue, and we'll be showing you these sequences for every 3 hours. As well as satellite pictures, you'll find the pressure maps. We can put on the lows, the highs, we can put on the fronts as well, and of course we can animate this through a series. The other thing to notice here, because this is forecast data, you'll find the colour in the top changes to yellow. And again, the sequence will be pushing through, and we'll be seeing it every 3 hours, going up to 36 hours ahead. We'll be describing exactly what's going on right the way around the country as well. This is a rainfall chart. Again, it's a forecast, so the colour in the top will be yellow, and we can animate this one too, and you can see how the rainfall patterns and how the snowfall will be moving, not just over the British Isles, but over the whole of Europe and over the Atlantic as well. And again, these will be pushing through in 3-hour sequences, so a fair amount of rain that we will be able to see there. Symbol charts in the same form as you know now. We don't have to put them on, we can just put them on electronically, and you can see them push their way down across the country. We can watch the sun come out. Again, different forms of charts as you see running through here. We'll be able to look right across into Europe and see the very low temperatures that you can see there just at the moment. Well, the other display that we're going to show is a league table. We've chosen 13 towns and cities up and down the country, so we can show the wettest, the coldest, the warmest, the sunniest places in the last 24 hours, or even in the last year if we want to. We can show almost anything we like on this new system, and as I've already said, we're looking at new displays for the coming months. But there is one immediate change. As from today, we're harmonizing with the rest of the Met Office world by replacing centigrade temperature scale with the Celsius one. But don't let it worry you too much. The two scales are identical, with 0 being the freezing point of water and 100 degrees the boiling point. It's really just a change of name. And of course, we shall still tell you the Fahrenheit equivalent. Well, that's our new system. We hope that it'll provide you with not only the most up-to-date forecast on television, courtesy of the Met Office computer, but in a way that's exciting and easily understood.